Welcome to the Red Letters Podcast. In this podcast, we explore topics that can be life transforming while delivering a message of hope. Thank you for joining us on this week's podcast. Today's topic is going to be peacemaker versus peacekeeper. They might sound the same, but they're different in many ways. We're going to open up the discussion, and one of the ways to look at it would be like the peacemaker would be the one that uses wisdom, that understands that there's going to be compromise needed to get to a solution and to bring peace in that situation, where someone who's more of a peacekeeper, they're non-confrontational. They just want peace at all cost. They don't really want the confrontation. They would rather just, hey, let's just not get too excited over this issue. Let's just change the subject, whatever the case is, just because they don't want to be in the middle of a mix. But hopping the fence back to the peacemaker, they're willing to get their hands dirty for the moment, knowing that healing could take place, resolution could take place, a real solution that would be good for both parties.
Tony, could you give me an example of both of them? Oh, you know what? Gio's listening. I wonder if he could give us an example of what the difference is.
For me, I would always like to think of myself as a peacemaker, but I didn't know there was a difference between a keeper and a maker. Mm-hmm. Off the bat, something that I don't know an exact story offhand, but a lot of it's when it comes to conflict, like arguments. If I already hear someone, like if my parents were arguing or something, I'd be like, hey, no, stop yelling or whatever. Not like it's actually happened, but in an example. And a peacemaker would be like, what are you guys yelling about? And almost like get into the nitty gritty and like, hey, let's figure this out and bring peace so that both of them can understand both sides, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I think peacemakers are the ones that aren't afraid to like, hey, let's talk about it. Right. Peacekeepers are like, hey, stop talking. Let's just have, a nice night or, just brush it off. I have a question right off the bat. When that scripture, he's talking about like the Beatitudes, he says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will inherit the kingdom of God. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is?
Because they're the ones that are actually, Ida, did you want to go? I believe that they're the ones actually making the peace and bringing people together and speaking the truth. And unlike the other ones that are brushing, they only use whatever is convenient for them and to empower them instead of using what God gave them to empower the people. Mm-hmm. So blessed are the ones who, how did you say it?
Blessed are the peacemakers.
Blessed are the peacemakers. So the peacemaker is the one that's embracing God's word.
Okay.
Because that's how I take it.
Yeah.
We are following what God laid out for us to do. As opposed to the keeper who's just saying, you know what, this doesn't work, let's do something else. Mm-hmm. But let's all be okay.
Yeah.
Let's all be okay with it. Yeah. That's how I take it. I don't know if Tony or I.
Yeah. Well, I was kind of thinking the same question when we were going to discuss this topic. So that same verse in another translation, it might help us understand a little bit more. It's Matthew 5:9. It says, you're blessed when you can show people how to cooperate instead of compete or fight. That's when you discover who you really are and your place in God's family. Mm-hmm. So I think that helps a whole lot because you're bringing you're showing people how to cooperate. You're avoiding fighting and arguing. You're avoiding the competing to who's right, who's wrong.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter as long as you're both better for it.
Right.
So I think coming to a resolution and a compromise in a healthy way to bring peace and to maintain it, not everybody wants to do that. It's always easier to be the peacekeeper. That's the easier way to go about it. And you could kind of, quote unquote, feel good about being that. Right. But you make a difference when you choose to be a peacemaker. Because in every family, God puts peacemakers. Mm-hmm. There's peacekeepers as well, but there's always people that are willing to sit down, and it's normally somebody that might be a little bit older, a little bit more wiser, has maybe a little more experiences where they've not done something correctly, and they learn from it, so now they can present it to this
Right, yeah.
situation that's taking place in your family, at work, whatever the case is. But what do you call it? Peacemaking is actually probably something that you should always be open to step into with wisdom.
Right.
Not just step in there just to say you're a peacemaker.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there's a scripture, I think it's in Proverbs, where it says that you jumping into an argument when you really don't have the competence to bring a resolution, it's like you're grabbing the ears of a dog and you're trying to keep them from biting you.
Right.
That's exactly what what that picture is like. So you're going to get bit because you're not going in with wisdom. You're just going in there thinking, hey, I could solve this issue.
Yeah.
And sometimes you end up in the mix.
Okay, the story that's coming to. Oh, do you want to share
Well, I
something?
just want to share something real quick because I
Sure.
wanted to reread in Matthew 5, one of the verses of the Beatitudes says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." Okay, and down here it says that God is the supreme peacemaker, and His sons follow His example. So that meaning, that definition, when we become a peacemaker, Jesus being the ultimate peacemaker, and when we reflect who He is, and when we follow His example, then we become His sons and His daughters.
Yeah.
So that's what that verse means when it being a peacemaker and inheriting the kingdom. And
Yeah.
but I think that's what my Bible reads.
Yeah, so thinking about the lens of seeing it through Jesus and how we're supposed to be like Jesus, the story that comes to mind is the woman who was caught in the middle of adultery, right? And then the religious leaders bring her to Jesus and say, okay, to keep the peace, the law says we need to stone her, right? But Jesus comes and instead of just, whatever he could have done, he decides to pause, right? He takes a minute and his response can almost seem, what's the word? Controversial, but he tells them, okay, to make peace, he provoked them. He says, okay, he who is without sin, cast the first stone, right? And I feel like that's like a mirror of what we're called to do as peacemakers and peacekeepers. Peacekeepers, how Gia was reading before we started, was like, they're going to keep the law. Like the religious leaders, the Pharisees did. But Jesus, to make peace, he provoked righteousness. And he's like, okay, technically Jesus was the only one who could cast a stone, right? And so just him provoking that question, he made peace because every one of them dropped their stones and walked away. And then he comes to the woman and says, where are your accusers now, right? And so I kind of feel like that's the picture of peacemaker versus peacekeeper. Does that make sense?
No,
Yeah.
that's really
Yeah,
good.
that's the story that comes to mind.
That was really good. Yeah.
One other thing, I guess I'll add to that because I was thinking of another scripture that came to mind, is Jesus never said, I came to be a peace keeper.
Yeah,
He
that's being
never
sword.
said that. He actually said the opposite. He said here in Matthew 10, the same book, 34, perhaps you think I've come to spread peace and calm over the earth, but my coming will bring conflict and division, not peace.
Yeah.
Because of me, a son will turn against his father, a daughter her mother, and against her mother-in-law. Within your own family, you will find enemies. Whoever loves father or mother or son or daughter more than me is not fit to be my disciple. So I don't believe it's so much that he wants that to take place, but when you choose to be a peacemaker, sometimes you're not going to look so hot. You're not going to look so good, but you're willing to say, hey, you know what? This is right. This is wrong. This is the compromise. Here's where you guys can meet in the middle. And let's just say you're in a discussion with two people and they both turn on you. That's, I think, what it's saying here is that there's going to be people that are going to know, hey, I need to follow Jesus at all cost. And it's not that I don't want to love my family. I just can't be in agreement on some of the stuff that you agree on anymore. Because now my eyes are open. I can't live the same way. I'm living from a different place. My love is at a whole different level that I have access to. So I love you enough to tell you the truth. Not so much because I'm going to pat you on the back because I just want to celebrate you at all costs.
Right.
That's not really somebody that's down to be a peacemaker. They just want to be a peacekeeper and pat you on the back and say, okay, little Johnny, you're going to be good. I'm proud of you. No matter what you do, okay, you want to, ditch class and you want to think you want to just live amok like they say. Oh, don't worry, he's my son. I love him no matter what. I think you really don't.
Right.
Because if you love them, you would be a peacemaker and be willing to discipline them out of a place of love, knowing that that's going to benefit them. So at the end of the day, they could actually live with peace and carry peace in their life and know what that is. But I think when you don't have peace, you're going to be miserable. So you have to be willing to participate and bring peace. And it doesn't have to look ugly. You don't have to be loud when you do it. Really, wisdom is a soft answer.
Yeah.
When it's used correctly, wisdom is a soft answer and can bring peace in any situation. But we have to be willing to go ahead and, hey, for the good of the family, for the good of this relationship, for the good of my coworkers, here's what I think is the best thing. Do you think we can move forward? Are you opposed to doing this and changing the direction of the course you two are choosing to go? Because neither one of them are right. But if we could change the course of what we're doing, and let's go ahead and go in this direction, I think as a whole, we'll benefit more as a company.
Right. That sounds good. And, Tony, just piggybacking on what you just said with not trying to fit in or look right for other people and just agreeing with them. I have a family member. Gosh, I hope she doesn't listen because she gets all into her feelings. But she did say she used to call me. And there was a time whenever she called and she would tell me stuff. And this goes for family and friends. And I used to agree with what they were saying. I guess I was the keeper at that point, the peacekeeper, because yeah, you're right. Oh, yeah, he's horrible. Oh, yeah, you should do this. And basically react to whatever anybody was doing. And then after obviously reading the word and understanding more what God was calling us to do, calling me to do, it was, when she would call, I was like, wait, do you want to hear what you want to hear or do you want to hear the truth? Because the truth is going to hurt you, but in the long run, it's going to benefit you. So it's being honest. Like I don't think there should be a problem with us being honest with what the truth is. Sometimes it's not about being right or wrong. It's not about definitely being about right or wrong. It's about what is best in this situation and what is going to help you carry over. So sometimes when they call and they say, well, let's say she's talking about her son. He did this and he did this and he did this. I'm like, yeah, I understand. How did you react? And when she tells me how she reacted, it's like, as long as you continue to react that way, you're just matching him. And he's a child, you're not. So you need to be the adult and bring him up to your level. And she's like, could you just for once not give me therapy? Could you just be my sister? It's like, so you want me to agree with you? So that's being a keeper. And I didn't want to agree with her because I knew that in the long run, it's hurting her. So it's like, I can't, if you're going to ask me for advice, I'm just going to tell you the truth and what I feel is going to work best. Not what's right or wrong, but what's going to work best, because the peacemaker wants that, because it's not what's going to happen in that moment. It's what's going to carry on and keep happening throughout time. If they continue to do things, if we continue to do things a little different than what we're known to do.
Yeah, I think that's good. One thing that I kind of heard in what you said is that a lot of times when people will come or you see this conflict going to happen or somebody reaches out to you, use your discernment on, are they coming for you to just appease what they're doing or not? Because if in the course of them communicating to you, you see in between the lines, they want the keeper, they don't want the maker.
They don't want the maker, yeah.
It's a good time to clarify, okay, what is it? Like you said, what do you want from me? You know what I mean? And then, of course, we always need to try to be the keeper.
Yeah.
There might be sometimes we just need to be a listener, but that doesn't mean we need to be in agreement.
Exactly.
And going back to that one scripture in the King James, it actually says that Jesus said, I came to bring peace and not a sword. Sometimes we need to be.
I came to bring a sword.
Oh, yeah, my bad. Sorry. We can edit that. Yeah, I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. I would say that I know that there's some people that love to bring the sword because it's a sword. It's nice. It's shiny. It can cause danger. You
lot
look
of-
strong. Yeah, you're empowered. So I would say be careful that you don't abuse that either, because I've lost family in my early years of following God because I was bringing that sword and I was coming to fight in the name of peace. And that's a bad place to be, because I was so quick to bring judgment to certain people in my family because there were certain things they were doing that I knew was not the way of God.
Right. Yeah.
And I would, touche, let's go. And I would rip at them and thinking I was loving them. But all I was doing is just destroying them.
Right.
And then it took years to heal those relationships and actually become a peacemaker, to where now those same people, I have the conversations where they know where I'm coming from. And now I'm actually functioning out of a place of love,
Right.
instead of weaponry. You know what I mean?
It brings to, I'm remembering that when we went to a family gathering, I'm not going to mention which part of the family, but we actually all went to a family gathering, and there was comments being made. A lot of the family members were coming to Tony and asking Tony's opinion, and it was a sibling of theirs that is a believer, but they didn't show up because they were at a special event. I want to say it that way. I don't want to go into details, but they were at an event, and it really bothered the siblings that were there at the gathering where we were, because that sibling didn't come, because that gathering was more important than them being there.
It was
And
like a
because
church event.
it was kind of like you were saying, where we've lost family and pushed family away because, they weren't as important than what the church event or that whatever event was going on. And when we were there at the family, they were like, it was really heavy on their heart. But the fact that he was such a good listener at first, and he was being a peacemaker, it was a good example of being a peacemaker, because he wasn't putting down the relative that was a believer, and he wasn't putting down the ones that were, not believers,
Right.
but he was bringing peace between them and helping them understand where maybe the other one's coming from. But it started with being a good listener. He was willing to listen to them, but they eventually invited him, and, hey, what do you think? What can you help us understand? Can you help us, see what's going on? Because it really bothered them. And not only was it bothering them, but it was even giving them a bad taste of, gosh, if this is the way it's going to be, then I don't want to be a Christian.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean?
I don't
And,
wanna
and it
serve
was
God.
that point, and that relative is that and that relative is really hard too, when it comes to, like, you're sinning and you're this, and throwing, the book at them, instead of just trying to be that Christian, that relative, that family member that's the peacemaker, right? Because even me, I'm guilty of it. I'm thinking of my baby brother when I first got saved. I remember just preaching and basically bringing condemnation and not love. I wasn't trying to be a peacemaker, because we would get in a big argument. We get in a heated argument, and I always thought, well, I'm right. And then I thought, I did my good diligence, with me being a Christian, but instead I made it worse for him. I made it to the point where none of my family members wanted to even be a Christian. Like, if that's what's being a Christian, then I want no part to play in it,
Yeah.
And it took years for me to get my family to come back. But then it's becoming like, a peacemaker.
Yeah.
Not a peacekeeper, because, like I said, I could go along with them and, think compromise and this and that, and be one way with them and be another way with, with the church. But I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I go ahead.
Oh, so I, like going off what Mom and kind of what you were saying, Dad, about like almost like I feel like a peacemaker doesn't have to be, this guy with a sword in battle. I think a lot of it's like delivery, how you
Yeah.
come across.
Yeah.
Because I know somebody who always speaks the truth, and I'm like, man, she's right, but her delivery is way off. Like, you can. I feel like it's, where she's like spitting fire and you're like, you got to bring honey,
Is
you
that
know?
me?
Yeah.
Is that me?
No, somebody.
Because I
But-
can be like that.
He'll tell you after the recording of the episode.
But I think of like, peacemakers in Hebrews when it talks about how the word is like a sword that divines even bone and marrow, like, super precise, where you got to have that wisdom to know what the root is and how to come across without, it's like this,
Bringing
tightrope.
division or
Yeah, without it's like this tightrope walk where
Almost a balancing act.
a balancing act, but where you got to get your hands dirty. But a lot of it, I think, is like the delivery, And I wish, or my question was, what's the advice you would give someone? Because I feel like how you were, Mary, where if someone came up to me, I'd be like, oh yeah, I understand, and then the other person came up like, oh yeah, I understand, and I never really was like, you were wrong though, you know. Well, I know there needs to be some boldness, or there has to be something inside where it just has to flip. But what advice would you guys give to like help make a peacemaker?
I think one of the best ways to do that is help them to discover it by the questions you give them.
that's good.
In other words, you put the carrot in front of them and lead them through questions so that they discover it themselves, because I think that's what Jesus did when he spoke in parables. He put the carrot in front of them to get them to get to the answer on their eyes were opened instead of here's the answer.
Yeah.
Because then they could be lazy about it, and it's not. Yeah, they might get the answer, but it's not going to help them grow in their learning process. When you're walking them through the questions, hey, what do you think about this? That's a
Then they're
perfect way to
answering it
deliver.
themselves without you having to be the.
As you're asking those questions, their guard is still down, and you keep it down.
Yeah.
So you're leading them, and then you're actually teaching them. You're not telling them this, but you're actually teaching them the process, how to get to a serious solution that's going to be beneficial. So next time when Gio's not around, you're on a vacation or something like that, they might look back at the process that you led them through, and it could help them in other areas of their life. So it benefits. The benefits of that are multiplied on how you bring them to discover what the solution is.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way.
It's actually called motivational interviewing.
There you
So
go.
yeah, there's a word for it. So you lead them to the answer by just questioning them, but you never actually give them the answer. So, and then, but what's really good about this, what Tony just said
She
is,
just saved all my time.
I wanted to hear you. What's really good about that, Gio, and just for any listener, is a person will start coming up with their own solution or coming up to those aha moments as they're speaking. Because once they start hearing themselves out loud, it's like, oh, I just really put my foot in it. I really they really can backtrack and see where they messed up, where they misunderstood, where they probably said something they weren't supposed to say, or took offense to something they weren't supposed to take offense to. But typically it happens by the guidance. Is like you guide them, and once an individual is willing, they can see themselves like, oh, you know what? It's me. But all it takes, once the person has it, like you've given them the tool, they can start talking to anybody now. And once they hear themselves, it's like, oh, okay, you know what? I'll backtrack. It was me. So they can find the solution themselves. And a lot of people need a lot of guidance. And it's okay because that's what we're equipped for. And a lot of people out there are equipped to give them that guidance to where they can find the solution to what's really bothering them. And the sad thing is a lot of people don't want to deal with that. They don't want to go to the roots, and they don't like what comes up when they have to face it's a fear, but they don't want to face what it is that really gets to them. Like this, the way she talks really bugs me. Why? Why did it bug you? The way she said this or did that, why? It's something in you. It's never about the other person. It's something about you. But once you start saying it out loud, it's like, oh, you know what? When you accept awareness, you accept that, you know what, maybe you are in the wrong. Yeah. And then you can, basically what you're doing is coaching this individual to try to get those solutions by themselves without going, off the deep end and believing something that's not really there.
Yeah.
What was that term called again?
Motivational interviewing.
Wow, that's so cool.
It's done a lot between spouses. I'm kidding. Motivational interviewing,
Got
yeah.
it.
Well, I'm not going to say that word because I won't remember it, but when you ask questions, because I learned that from Tony, when it comes to talking to difficult people.
Yeah.
When it's really difficult people and you're not getting your point across, or they're not really engaged, or they're not listening, then I'll come out with the questions.
Yeah.
And
Or
I'll-
you just repeat what they're saying.
Yeah. And I found that really does work.
Yeah.
Especially with talking to the people that don't, that are really difficult to talk to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard it from both ends. I've learned this from my uncle on how he would counsel me. He'd make me walk through that road of answering why I did what I did, and I'm feeling stupid in the process. And I've even had it with my kids. Like I think I might have shared this before, where I think it was Dominic. I was turning around and I came off real strong with him, and then he turned and said, when I was all done, he goes, "Dad, did you really have to say it all that loud?" And I was just like, "Oh man!" It was a soft answer,
Yeah.
and then it wasn't a question. What could I do but
Yeah.
eat it? And I was just like, "Oh, I felt so stupid," And that's happened with other kids of mine in different times. So
No, Gio just has to look at him
Yeah.
with those eyes and go, and where he's like almost teary eyed, and he'll just give me that look like, and then I'm like, I get it.
I get it. Yeah.
I know what I did wrong.
But I would not hesitate to try to step into being a peacekeeper if you feel like you're the maker. Don't hesitate to do that, because you'll see initially it's tough. It's tough to start to do that if you've never done that. But as you do that and you start seeing fruit from that, you're encouraged to do it more. Not that you look for it, because you're going to be in a hot mess all the time if you're looking for
Yes.
opportunities to be the peace maker.
And it's really good to, but like you said, Tony, we have to be equipped, I think.
Yeah.
But the peacemaker is somebody who actually wants peace,
Yeah.
who wants what's best for everyone, who wants what's righteous. It's not about, like I said earlier, about being right or wrong, because right or wrong is subjective. Because I could think that I'm doing something right, but then somebody across the street can be looking at me like, wow, she is so, what is she doing? So it's about, I believe the maker, like Jesus said, it's like for those, the peace, what was that quote again that you said when he calls them?
Blessed are the peacekeepers.
For they would be
Please,
called children of God.
Peacemakers, for they will be children of God.
They become the sons of God.
Sons of God.
Yes, it's because they want what's right, the righteous. They want what's righteous, and they don't want it just for themselves. They're looking out for the greater good. Yeah. So.
Right.
Yeah, and
And did you guys kind of give an example of what a peacekeeper is?
go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, did you guys?
Yeah, I think we did.
You did? Okay, I wasn't sure.
Well, I don't know. I know we don't have that much time, but where would you gauge yourselves? I think because I want to say that I'm a maker, a peacemaker, but I'll be completely honest. There's situations where I'm just like sitting back and trying just to be the peacekeeper, because people don't want to hear it. People just aren't open to hearing what's righteous, to hearing what is best. They want what they want, and that you can't get them off that pedestal. So I know we're not supposed to be wishy-washy or hot or cold, but there is times that I have found myself where I just sit back. I was like, I'm not even going to deal with this. Like, I tried, but I'll just sit back. But there's very little situations where I do that, but there are situations, because for the most part, I do aim to be the peacemaker. But I don't know. What do you guys?
Well, I think it's safe to say that neither one are bad, because it's not like we're trying to say that the peacemaker's the good thing to do and the peace keeper is the bad thing to do. I think it depends on the situation. If there's a big family dinner, it's a wedding or something like that, you don't really want to try to do a counseling session right there
Yeah,
and be a peacekeeper.
Yeah.
At the moment, you want to be a peacemaker. Hey, let's just pacify this, and then we can
Peace.
say it backwards.
Yeah,
No, the
but we know.
peacemaker is what you don't do at the wedding, is what I
Right.
said.
No, I know, but you said you title it
Yeah.
peacekeeper.
Okay. Well, the peacekeeper is what you'd want to do at the wedding.
Those functions, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think it's the application, the setting, but I would always try to be more of a peacekeeper. And I've learned that because I don't feel that was me initially, because I was the guy that would be in the background all the time and not really want to be confrontational. And not that I run to it, but it was almost like a learned thing that I had to learn in order to function in that place and or to encourage other people to do it there as well. But I would say that I like, let's just say one is the peacekeeper, and then peacemaker is 10. If you're asking like where we feel we're at, I would probably say I'm maybe a 6 or a 7. I think I lean a little bit more towards the maker than I am the keeper.
Okay.
But again, I think it depends on the situation.
Yeah.
What about
me
you,
too.
Mom?
I think lately I've been more of a peacekeeper, but I've been kind of in the bad way because I've been lately like, instead of just being confronting a situation, I'm more like, let me just shut down and just suck it up and avoid any conflict whatsoever and not say nothing. And then just, I end up harboring it, which I know is really bad. Instead of vocalizing it and waiting for the right moment to share or you know what I mean, to express what I'm feeling at that time. So I think more lately it's been more of a peacekeeper, but in the wrong way. Because I think you could be a peacekeeper too and title yourself as a peacekeeper. But in my situation, when you harbor it and you shut down and you just walk away from it, but yet the thought and the emotions are still there and the feelings, then that's when it can become toxic and wrong.
Right. Exactly.
So
I think for me, I think similar with Mary, I think right now I lean towards more peacekeeping because honestly, I feel like throughout at first I felt like I was more a peacemaker where I'd like, hey, let's get to the root of it. But then I think over the years, I started getting tired because I feel like the certain groups that I feel like I invested my own word or invested my time in trying to help.
Right.
I feel like it hasn't gotten anywhere, like almost like they haven't, like how my dad said, they haven't figured out for themselves.
Right.
So right now I think I'm more going to the peacekeeper. Unless it starts, if I see a situation where it gets ugly, then I'll jump in like, hey, and I'll try to figure it out right then and there. But right now I feel like I'm more in the peacekeeping, and I don't. It eats me up inside when I walk away from something because I'm like, I know both of them are hurting, and I just did nothing to help both of them, if that makes sense.
Okay.
This might be controversial, but I almost feel like peacekeeper is a safe bet, right?
Yeah.
But I believe as believers, we're always called to always be a peacemaker.
yeah.
It may look different in different scenarios, but I feel like if I say I'm a peacekeeper, I feel like that's safe to say.
I think that's the ultimate goal, to become a peacemaker.
Maker.
Yeah, but I think to say, okay, well, sometimes I'm this and that, I feel like as believers, we're called to be one, always. My reason being is like an example is I remember my cousin, she is like probably one of the most hard-headed, stubborn people. Lily, I love you. She knows this. But she's one of the most stubborn, like she will not break. Like you have to do so much has to happen to her for her to break. And I remember one time she was going through it, but she was still so hard, so stoic. And me and my mom went to the house to go visit her. And my mom is speaking truth, just like talking to her. And I'm like, okay, Lord, I leaned into the Holy Spirit. I was like, okay, show me or tell me what I can do or say to break through, like Gio was talking before, like between the bone and the flesh. Like, let me get to the heart. And a peacemaker, you almost feel like you have to like talk or, resolve things. But literally, I looked at her and I said, Lily, I said, there's something you're hiding from God and you need to just let it out now. Something like that. The moment I said those little words, she broke like a baby. And I had no idea. I was like, I don't even know what she's hiding, But it was just as leaning into the Lord to say, okay, Lord, how do I respond in this situation? Sometimes it looks like I need to just dig. Sometimes it looks like I need to be quiet, let them talk. And sometimes just one little word, one question can change everything and break through anything. Do you know what I mean? But I just think that we're always called to be a peacemaker. Am I? I feel like I'm getting there. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes, obviously. But I think the goal is to just be sensitive, like how my dad taught me when I was younger. He's like, always have an ear tuned to heaven and you'll never go wrong when you're having conversations. So I feel like that's the key to being a peacemaker is just always, Lord, how do I respond in this situation? And every time you'll never feel like how you're saying, Gio, like, man, I'm walking away and I feel like nothing's happening. Maybe there's something that the Lord wants you to do, but sometimes we just don't hear it, or we're not really like maybe our relationship with God isn't at that point where we can hear his voice over the noise. you know? And so, yeah, my heart is to be a peacemaker. I'm working on being that all the time. But I know the deeper my relationship grows with the Lord, the stronger my ear will be tuned to heaven, you know?
That's good.
There's actually one more thing that I would want to add, especially on this topic, is a lot of times when there's siblings, a lot of times the older one is a little bit more, I don't know if it's equipped or they feel like they have more wisdom, but it seems like the older one seems to be one that could be a peacekeeper a little more natural than a middle child. A middle child, the tendency is to be a keeper because they're always...
Yeah, it's
No,
peacemaker.
keeper's the middle child, the maker's the older.
Okay, yeah, but you
Yeah,
said peacekeeper
okay.
for the older.
Yeah, we're gonna have to edit this whole episode. But why I say that's because normally a middle child and or the middle children are always trying to get that attention. It seems like because the oldest one gets it for their reasons and the
Yeah.
baby gets it for their reasons.
Yeah.
So they're always in the middle. So they're natural peacekeepers. But so sometimes it's a little bit more of a struggle to be a peacemaker because they're so their default is to be the keeper.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I'm not saying you can't be either one of them, whether you're the oldest or the middle, but it's just something to kind of look at yourself because sometimes that could be a factor in which one you tend to lean towards. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
So in wrapping it up, thank you guys for listening. Once again, there's a peacemaker and there's a peacekeeper. And let's just strive to be the peacemakers because we all want peace and we all want what's best for everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in and we will see you next week.